Hello everyone, my name is Paul from GuitarGearConnection, and welcome to this episode of All About, where we're going to be discussing the Vox Conqueror, one of the most underrated amps that come out of the 60s, as well as the last Vox amp the Beatles were known to use. But before we get into the episode, if it was not for these resources, this video would not be possible. The first resource that I used was Vox Amplifiers, The JMI Years by Jim Ellier. Such a great resource, and has every little detail you can think of. Next up, I used Beatles Gear by Andy Babuik. Of course, who doesn't know this book? I also used The Vox Story by David Peterson and Dick Denny. This also had little fine details about manufacturing. And of course, probably the single most important source that I used for this entire project, and I will continue to use them, and there's such a great group of people, is voxsupreme.org.uk. Every little thing you can think of is on this website. Now, of course, a lot of the things coming up I might have missed or fine details I just didn't include in this video. Please head over to that website and get every little detail you can think of from tons of different amps, from AC50s, AC100s, the Supremes, the Conqueror, the Defiant, and I could just keep going on. Such a great website. I love them. Keep it up, guys. You're the best. The last resource that I used was thevoxshowroom.com. Tons of cool info there, especially about the trolley on the coming up video. Tons of information overall about any Vox amp you can think of. Please head over there and check them out. So now, without further ado, let's get into the history of the Vox Conqueror. The first mention of a new solid-state line of JMI amps coming to the market was in a 1966 issue of Beat Instrument. This was the only magazine that Vox JMI advertised in. The all-solid-state amp was a different approach for JMI, since they primarily produced tube amps, or at least compared to their current emphasis of the short-lived 700 series hybrid amps. By October of 1966, the new solid-state line was in full swing, with pre-production models popping up in advertisements. These pre-production amps were easy to spot, with the foot switch input jack being on the left side of the control panel and the indicator lights on the top right side of the panel. Full release was planned for the first month of 1967, but changes to the amp caused pushback by 4 months, bringing the final release to April. It is noted that some of the models could have come out as early as March of '67. These amps were made at the Burndept Works facility on West Street in Erith, Kent, England. Later VSL models were moved to a new factory in Hastings, England. A price list in 1967 shows the Conqueror at 170 pounds, or about $3,500 in today's money. Referred to as a treble model, meaning guitar amp, and also referred to as super twin, meaning piggyback or separate head and cab combo. Pretty much all the JMI Conqueror amps, as well as the JMI solid-state amps for the most part, can be all classified into 4 different categories. There are a few details to note for each generation. First up, the writing on the top plates of the preamp all featured something slightly different, though early and late JMI models are tough to tell apart. Next up, each generation's serial plate was slightly different, whether it be wording or font. And then lastly, the dimensions of the speaker cab and the head all stay the same, no matter what generation. The first generation is of the early JMI units. These were only produced in 1967. They came through with all the standards, such as the Celestion T1088 Alnico speakers. The input jacks were all metal, and the logo on the head and cab just say Vox, and that lettering should be in silver. Serial numbers started at 1000 or 1001 and ran to about 1200. The second generation is of the later JMI units. These were produced in the last few months of 1967, with some production running into the early months of 68. Two main changes were made. The word solid state is now stamped onto the Vox logo on both the head and the cab. Early serial number logos are still in silver before switching to gold. Also, the input jack soon switched from metal to black plastic. Serial numbers ran from about 1200 to 1600. The third generation is Vox Sound Equipment Limited, or VSEL. There were around 380 of these amps made from late 68 to early 1970. The changes that VSEL made to the amp happened gradually throughout its manufacturing. The first modification was switching from the diamond grill cloth on the back of the head to straight black Tolex. All the Conquerors still came through with the beloved T1088s, but now with a different sticker on the bell. Some serial numbers, however, did come through with the Goodman speakers. A small but big change was the deletion of the standby switch on the back of the head, along with the standby light on the front. Final change was the preamp, featuring a new schematic layout at the tail end of VSEL's ownership. Serial numbers ran from 2000 to around the 2380s. The last generation was Vox Sound Limited, or VSL. They only produced Conquerors from mid-1970 to 1971, and most of that being whatever VSEL had left over. The amps also would have come through with the cheaper Goodman ceramics. The string wrapping around the head and the cab came through silver instead of the previous gold. Serial numbers range from the 2380s to 2500. So as you can tell, Vox Sound Equipment Limited, or VSEL, did the most amount of modifications to the amplifier, which most seem to be, unfortunately, cost-saving measures. Next up, we have the features of the amplifier. All of the four generations came with the same layout. On the top of the control panel are two channels, one normal and one brilliant. The normal channel featured top boost, and the brilliant channel featured MRB, or mid-range boost. Of course, each channel also has volume, treble, and bass. On the front of the control panel, starting on the far left, is the tremolo section, with two knobs, one for speed and one for depth. Next is the reverb section, with a knob to select what channel you want reverb, along with a blend option. The last section is where the MRB knob is, the foot switch outlet, and distortion. Most of the amps would have featured the Celestion T1088 Alnico speakers, but later VSELs came with ceramics, and most of the VSLs came through with the cheaper ceramics. Now, there's a very good reason why a lot of people decided to ditch the side trolley stand that came factory with the amp. Either people would just, for the most part, leave no stand on it at all, or B, when North Coast Music came out with these stands, the tubular trolley style, a lot of people bought those as well to convert over for the safety and well-being of their Conqueror amps. Now, North Coast Music put it perfectly, so I stole this excerpt right from their website. These side stands had a serious engineering flaw. The speaker enclosure, less the head, could be safely tilted as desired. However, once the head was secured to the speaker enclosure, the weight of the head shifted the center of gravity of the amp above the swivel point of the trolley. This created an unstable condition that would cause the Conqueror enclosure to flip over backwards, slamming the amp head onto the floor. For this reason, most people remove the side swivel stands from their Conqueror speaker cabinets. Now, when it comes to what bands featured this amplifier in their lineup, it's pretty much tough to beat the Beatles. Now, of course, there were a few other bands from the 60s, 70s, and the 80s that did have this amplifier in their lineup. But unfortunately, I just don't know enough about those bands, and there isn't enough information circulating out there on exactly what was going on with it all, so I, of course, chose not to include it in this video. But when it comes to the Beatles, this amplifier left a major mark in music history. From the White Album, all those cool effects you hear on Birthday at the end with the MRB being switched, Helter Skelter, there's a lot. So let's just dive in briefly about the Beatles using this amplifier. The Beatles were first seen with the amps on the All You Need Is Love live broadcast on June 25th, 1967. The next sighting was on the Hello Goodbye promotional video November 10th, 1967. During that session, however, they used UL 730 cabs, which is about the same size as the Conqueror cabs, featured the same T1088 speakers, thus making the cab virtually no different than the Conqueror. During the promotional taping of Lady Madonna and Hey Bulldog, you can see the real Conqueror cab without any of the hardware. Around the same time, the Beatles had an insurance quote made up of their Vox equipment. The list shows them owning 2 complete Conqueror setups, along with 1 Conqueror speaker cab. So to finish this video off, I'm going to give you guys all a little sound demo of the amp. Now it's just going to be more of a comparison between each channel, the MRB and all that. I'm not the best guitar player in the world, so don't expect me to do anything crazy. Again, this is just a little sound comparison. Stay tuned for future videos though, where I will compare this amplifier versus other ones. So I hope you guys all enjoyed it, and please feel free to comment and leave me any other suggestions that you might want to see. And of course, check out my Instagram where you can see tons of cool pictures and videos there as well. Have a great day, everybody. I'll see you all soon.